So we'll get that recording started and we will go ahead and start with our slides. So again, we thank you for joining us here in Western Maryland this afternoon. This is our first lunch break gardening Q&A of the season, and we'll be back again on April the 8th, the same time, same Zoom link, and we'll also be streaming it via Facebook as well. So with that, you are joining University of Maryland Extension. We are part of the College of Agriculture and Natural Resources. You can see this flow chart that tells you exactly where University of Maryland fits into the lineup with University of Maryland. And because we do receive federal funding at the university level, we wanted to be sure that everyone understands the Injustice for All poster and make sure that if you have any questions about how to receive any of our services in our classes, that you know how to access that. All right, so with that, we just wanted to do a quick introduction to ourselves. I guess I'll go first. My name is Ashley, and I do work with Garrett County Extension. So my office is in Oakland, and I'm also the Master Gardener Coordinator and the Home Horticulture Educator. So if you have any questions from Garrett County, feel free to reach out to me anytime. This is our contact information. And with that, I'll let you say hello, Sarah.
You got it. I went ahead and muted myself so that we don't have that back chatter. But my name is Sarah. I'm here in Allegheny County. I'm located in Cumberland, close to Bedford Road. I'm similar to Ashley. I do home horticulture. I'm the Master Gardener Coordinator, and I'm also an ag educator here in Allegheny County. Also, if you have any questions, let me know. And for some reason on our Master Gardener website, if you type in you have a question, it always comes to Allegheny because we're alphabetically first. So chances are you'll probably get me no matter what venue you go to because Allegheny County is first alphabetically.
There you go. Nothing wrong with that. In ABC order in school, that's how it was for me because my last name would begin with a B. So it works to your advantage sometimes. All right. So with that, we wanted to jump right into some of the submitted questions that we received. So this was kind of a really good one for this time of year as people are starting to get excited about starting new flower gardens and new areas in their landscape. So this was the question. I'm digging a new flower bed in my yard and I'm looking for an environmentally friendly edging material to keep the grass from growing back in the bed. Here's a photo of the sod. It has been cut and removed with a little bit of dirt, and then I covered it with this weed block. So the question, do we have suggestions on what we can use for edging, what kind of garden soil and compost, and then if they should cover it with mulch and newspaper? Some additional questions about timing and that sort of thing. So Sarah, do you want to share anything about this or do you want me to start?
The only thing is starting off is just first thing is what are they going to plant? That was Ashley and I kind of talked about this a little bit, is what they're going to plant. And then we also had a little at length conversation about what they're going to put down over top of it in order to keep the weeds from coming up. And it's kind of funny because just this weekend I saw it was on Facebook and someone was getting ready to start doing some landscaping. I guess it was nicer where they live. And they started digging down a couple inches. And guess what they found? Turns out the person had put down a bunch of weed paper all through like their entire yard trying to eliminate it in some ways. So it's also mindful to think like, are you going to be planting something there anytime soon? Because, things are going to, the soil's going to grow on top of it. And, you're going to be dealing with that. And if you've ever had to rip this out underneath of landscaping before, it's a hassle. There's nothing fun about that. So that was the first thing that came to my mind was like, how long is this for? What are your long-term plans? Because it does a good job of keeping the weeds out, but that's where that ends.
Yeah, definitely. So that's a great comment. So again, this is going to last for a long time. And some of these different thicknesses of weed fabric, again, sometimes they last a long time, sometimes they don't last a very long time. Sometimes they're so thin that stuff either grows all the way up through or it gets little tiny holes and it doesn't really help you out that much. So again, use it as long as you understand what the purpose is. And again, if you're going to use it, make sure that you're not going to put a lot of stuff on top of it, because then your weed seeds are just going to fall in there and it's just going to be a brand new planting bed for it. So we have a few slides here to show you some other products that we kind of were researching a little bit. So this is actually a product that's similar to weed fabric, but it's actually called landscape fabric. So this is actually more like a garden mat. It's more like a polypropylene material. So this is what's used more like as an underlayment for really heavy duty construction projects. So the cool thing about this is also that it does let water go down through it. But if you put like thick amounts of mulch or anything like that, if the water comes quickly, it can't penetrate really, really fast. So I actually use this a lot of times, like in my vegetable garden, where I'm going to be able to pick it back up. It's a lot easier than just thin plastic. It's a little easier to work with if you use things like landscape staples. But again, for a permanent garden bed with perennials and that sort of thing, which this question was referring to, it gets a little bit more complicated to use. But I did want to share that as a potential product if you are looking to start a new area. These are the other, the second step to that system. So if you are going to use the landscape fabric, these what they call landscape staples work really nicely because they go in and they hold it in place, so you don't have to worry about the wind blowing it up. They're pretty easy to remove if you decide that you do want to take it up, like at the end of the season, if it's like a vegetable situation or something like that. So I did want to share those two products with you.
Yeah, but keep in mind with those landscape staples, they're not all created equal. And I know here in Allegheny County, we have a lot of soil that's heavy in clay and heavy in rocks. And sometimes you'll go to pound those in. And if they're a really low quality kind, you're going to have them all misshapen and like they'll turn into L's and sevens. And they're frustrating sometimes. So make sure you read the reviews and make sure it's a quality that you feel is going to work well for your soil.
Yeah. And I've even used them season after season. If you just soak
Mhm.
them in like vegetable oil or something like that when you're done, that you can get several seasons of use out of them. Again, if you're not putting them straight into rock, and that sort of thing. So yeah. Some of the other products we looked at for natural types of edging material. So again, the question was, what can I use for edging? So they do have some really nice eucalyptus types of pieces of wood that I saw. There was some cedar lawn edging options, as well as this one I thought was pretty cool was bamboo edging. So we know that bamboo is kind of an exotic invasive in a lot of places, not so much here in probably Garrett County. I don't know about Allegheny, but
We have a good bit of that. There's some places here close to the office that it's the not the clumping, but the runner one, and it's taken over a couple places.
so yeah,
But this
so
is a
maybe
good
there's a
use of it.
make your own edging out of bamboo and it'll stand up. So those are just a couple ideas that we came across. Um, and then I just wanted to go back to the question here quickly. So the person asked about
I remember
timing.
that.
So like, will the planting native perennials, what time should that start? So, here again, between Garrett and Allegheny County, there's going to be a little bit of difference in timing.
Mhm.
Perennials can probably be seeded pretty good around the middle of April here if you're going to just put them straight out in your garden. If you're going to give them some protection, like we're going to talk a little bit about winter sowing techniques, like in milk jugs, then you can probably start them now. But it's a little bit early to just be sprinkling seeds out in your garden here because you're going to have a lot of competition with weeds and that sort of thing.
Yeah, and it really it depends on what native they're planting. I know some need a cold stratification period of close to 90 days, and you would be running really close to that here in Allegheny County. I'm not sure if you would get enough to in order for you to get it winter sowed properly. So that would be another thought, but that's good for the winter sowing because usually winter sowing's cutting off like really close to now if you're going to pull that off.
Yeah, unless it's something warm season like tomatoes. So
Absolutely.
yeah, yeah, great concept. So if you guys have questions about this, feel free to enter them in the chat or just let us know. But these are just some thoughts and one of the questions that came in.
And I'm doing my best to watch the Facebooks too. So if, because it's on Allegheny and Garrett. So I just saw someone share, that's fine, but I was looking to see if anybody else is making a comment, so I'll keep my eyes over there, but if we miss it, it is not intentional at all.
Not at all. Yeah, please reach out again. All right, so we devoted a little bit of time to live questions. If we don't have any, feel free to enter them as we go along. Um, we're just going to slip through a couple of these slides here for live questions. Um, and until we get some people entering something, we're going to jump into some different types of discussion and just some timely tips that we thought maybe people would enjoy.
We got one question there, not on Facebook, on here.
Okay, native plants that work well for stabilizing a slope. Okay, that's a good question. So there are some, like, depends on, of course, what you have, like if it's shade or sun, if it's wet, if it's moist. There are some really nice um, ground covers that can work. Like I'm thinking of like the heuchera, I'm talking like the coral bells, some of those native plants. Let me just pull up a little thing here. Um,
I was looking at some of the natives too. I was wondering if little blue stem would be one that they would possibly recommend. And I mean, anything with native, you're just thinking, and this is what I'm thinking, Ashley, like long roots is what we're looking for.
Definitely, definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Any
Water resistant.
natives have double the root size than any of the like daylilies or, any of that sort of thing. So even if you're looking at different types of shrubs, I don't know what you're looking for on your slope,
Yeah, it
but
depends.
like any of your hollies can be really nice. Um, we can keep talking about that as we go along. There's something called golden ragwort that likes a little bit wetter and it can actually be a little bit aggressive. But let me
Your
drop
black-eyed
this.
Susans can be similar. They do a pretty good job. They have nice long roots, but they also can be pretty aggressive. I've noticed a
This,
lot of goldenrod that tends to grow on slopes.
yeah,
Yet
your
again,
asters.
aggressive.
Yeah.
Yeah. I would even
Golden,
be wondering if it's a darker slope, if like a columbine would work well on it, if it's not getting much light.
mhm.
Ferns, if it's not getting much light, would probably be good too.
Yeah, and I really like the native bluebells. Like they again like a little bit more shade. And they're going to be like an ephemeral, so they're going to come up super early in the spring and then they're going to die off. So like whenever your black-eyed Susans or something else is coming out, they can grow really nicely together. But usually we always go with extensions philosophy, right plant, right place. But again, if
Hmm.
you can have multiple plants where it's not just a single monoculture, we tend to see a lot more success with that because if one plant struggles one year, then some of your other plants can often jump right in on those off years and you don't have any bare spots that way.
Yep, that sounds good. I think we got a second question there.
Okay, and I'm not familiar with
I know,
camellia,
I'm like,
so we're going to look that up a little bit and come back to that question here in a minute. Thank you for asking.
mm,
So one of the best parts about spring, of course, is when you are getting ready to plan your garden. And I think seed starting catalogs and seed catalogs in general can be one of the most exciting parts of our spring season. So we just wanted to be sure that we spend a few minutes talking about seed catalogs and all the different varieties and all the different cultivars and that sort of thing that you can find online now. So just remember that when you are looking for new varieties that you do want to pay attention to if it's a perennial, what our planting zones are. There was just a brand new United States Department of Agriculture plant hardiness zone map that was published a couple weeks ago. So if you haven't had a chance to look at that, we do recommend that you take a look. Most people actually went a little bit warmer in the plant zones, which of course is what we're seeing a lot across the United States. So just take a look at that. This is probably not the most newest photo here, so just be sure that you visit the USDA map and type in your zip code for wherever you're located so that you can be sure you're ordering the right perennials for your zone. Anything you want to add about seeds, Sarah?
I tend to try new seeds every year, something strange, something different. But even doing that, make sure you're getting it from a quality place. Just always reiterating, there's some places online that have bizarre seeds for sale, and there's even places that you don't, I mean, you just always have to remember you could be bringing in seeds that could be diseased, they could have something on them, or maybe it's just not appropriate for your area. And sometimes you can find things that would be very invasive in your area. So just always be mindful about what you're purchasing, that it's the best choice for what you're growing. But I did find something on that flower that was mentioned, which is gorgeous. I'm not sure how you say that, camellias. I'm probably saying it wrong because that's how my world works. But it does say their fertilization time for being fertilized is it's a pretty long one. It's from late October until April. So sounds like it is the right time for that, which is typical. Most things like to be fed in early spring.
And usually when they're getting ready to bloom is a great time to give them a little boost. If you have any links, Sarah, you want to drop that in there, whatever you found in the chat so they can
Got it.
visit that specifically. Thank you.
You got it.
All right, so the other exciting part of spring is going to be starting seeds. So I don't know if any of you on the call have already started any seeds or anything like that, but we just thought we would include a few slides with some general guidance about that. So if you are wanting to start seeds for the first time, or if you've already, tried your hand at that, just a few tips. Of course, here in Garrett County, we have such a short growing season. We often are find ourselves doing a lot of transplants just so we can extend our growing season. So we can't put things like tomatoes and peppers and that sort of thing directly in the garden as a seed, or we would never get any produce. So anything with a long maturity is a good choice for transplanting. For starting early in the season. More of the things you're going to direct seed would be your root crops, anything that's tall and skinny, things with a really short season like lettuces and spinach. All those things can go directly into the garden. So we did want to share just a few tips right now. Last weekend, I started my peppers because they grow
Ooh,
so slowly. So peppers are a great thing to start with. But if you're just starting this adventure for the first time and you've never done it before, just be forewarned that they grow super, super slow and they like really warm temperatures.
that was a
Um,
big part. If you don't have them warm enough, they will not germinate, and then you'll think that you got bad seeds or you're doing something wrong, and it's not. They really want to be warm.
They do, they do. So, I mean, the best investment that I've ever made when it came to seed starting has been a seedling heat mat. So
Yep.
they look similar to this picture here on the right. You can find them at any hardware store, most big box stores, online, lots of different options. And if you don't want to go real fancy, these seedling heat mats don't have to have a thermostat, so it'll just keep the soil temperature about 20 degrees warmer than what your air temperature is. So as you probably know, most seeds have a really, really specific range of soil temperature that they want to be at before they break germination and start to grow. So the other things that you could be starting now would be anything slow growing, like on the flower side. We started some snapdragons, some petunias last weekend as well. So anything longer than like 100 to 150 days, you should probably be thinking about getting in the soil pretty soon.
Yeah, but also be thinking about the size too. I mean, you're going to have to keep these housed for quite a long time before they can actually go outside. And I've done this before, Ashley, where I'm like, I get the jitters and I'm like, I'm going to totally start planting. And
Yes,
you get,
every year.
you get too early. Like people are like, you haven't sowed your tomatoes yet? No, because I don't want like 3 foot tomatoes trying to live in my house and me deal with them until it's time to plant in the soil. And in my past opinion, they didn't outperform the ones that were started several weeks later because it took so much effort for them to get used to living outside as this big old lanky plant instead of like an appropriate size seedling.
Yeah, that's a great point. So yeah, we always need to not let our emotions get ahead of us in gardening, right? And
Yes.
think it all the way through.
And don't let
Um,
the pressure. Sometimes your friends will be like, oh my gosh, I started, and their list is like a laundry list or a shopping list. That's okay. They can start whatever they want. You be mindful of your time frame, and it's okay if they get the first tomato or the first pepper. Yours will come on. It just might be a week behind, and that's totally fine.
Right. So a question from the chat is success with petunias. So that's a great question.
I
So
didn't see that one.
petunias and snapdragons, they actually need direct light to germinate. So if you're having trouble, don't put any soil on top of them. Make sure you just sprinkle them on top of your soil wherever you're starting them at, and make sure you have a nice bright light to help them break germination. And I know I have a lot of trouble with a fungal disease called dampening off on my
Mhm.
petunias. So I always add, you can see this is a picture of our setup. We always add an oscillating fan to our seedlings so that it helps dry up any excess moisture on the soil surface. And if you have a heavy hand with watering, it can again make sure that soil is drying out quickly enough to keep your seedlings healthy. It also helps to mimic Mother Nature with wind movement, so it kind of helps to make your stalks a little bit stronger.
I was gonna say I just saw that on a couple different sites this weekend about how important a fan is.
Oh my, I love it. It's and you can see like we have this like an incandescent bulb here because I don't necessarily want it for the light because this is outside, but I just want it for the extra heat because we kind of get a jump on our season here without having to heat the whole greenhouse with like our firewood. So anytime we can, get a few extra weeks with no firewood burning, it's a good thing for us.
Yeah, but that's a really good point, Ashley, is with that light, that it's because it's in a greenhouse, it's outside. This one light, if you put it under your seedlings, like in your home under that light, that's not going to work. You need your actual grow lights. They need to be, I think it's within like how much, like 6 inches of the seedling. It needs to be
Yeah, really as
relatively close.
close as possible when it's starting. Yep.
Yeah, so this is great for a greenhouse, but if you're going to grow inside, please make sure that you have a light that is down and it can be nice and close. And a sunny window does not usually work. People really want to use sunny windows, but
Yeah,
you're going
it's
to
just
have a
not quite enough.
leggy, you're going to have a
Yeah.
leggy creature is what you're going to end up with.
Right. And just straight fluorescent shop lights work fine. They
They
give out the
do.
right wavelengths, and they're a little bit cheaper than grow lights. Grow lights have come down in price a lot over the last 5 years. And again, with the invention of the internet and being able to get so many things at our fingertips, they're a lot easier to get now than they used to be. But again, shop lights, and as Sarah said, the closer you can keep it to your seedlings, the better. And as they grow, you can kind of
I love that.
adjust that height.
Did you see the other question?
Okay, so once the seeds germinate on the heat mat under lights, when can you place trays under lights without heat mats?
I think that would really determine where you're growing it at. Like I
Yes.
keep my seedlings in my computer room because it's on like shelves and it's a really warm room. So once they germinate, I'm not too worried about them in there. But if they were in my basement where it's cooler, I would probably keep mine on seed mats for a little bit just because it's so cold down there. I'm afraid I would think it would slow their growth down considerably if it's really cold.
Right. So it really goes back to how warm it is where you're transplanting them out to. So we leave ours on our heat mats until we transplant them into bigger containers. So probably about 2 to 3 weeks. It just depends on how quickly we need to move them out of there. So, um,
Exactly.
the longer you can baby them, the better. But once they're up and growing and they have their true set of leaves, once they get those really true leaves and you can start fertilizing them, you're totally okay to get them off that heat mat.
Yeah, and they'll kind of tell you, like some of my especially my peppers, are just slow growers. Like my jalapenos always seem to take their sweet time doing anything, whereas
Always.
my bell peppers are like, oh, we're good, we're ready to go. So I found that different varieties can grow totally different depending on
Yeah, and
just, I
that
guess,
could
their
go back
genetics.
to like your genetics too. If it's a hybrid variety, some of that
Mhm.
hybrid vigor is bred into that particular seed so that it can really grow quicker. So, it kind of
Yeah,
all goes back to what you got in that seed.
that is the truth.
All right. So we just wanted to talk a little bit again about cool season crops. So these are going to be traditionally those plants that thrive in the cool weather. So if you are looking at plants that you can start putting directly into the soil outside, in the next few weeks, this would be a nice list of things to start considering. And a lot of people are very surprised at, how cold hardy some of these plants are. This is a nice planning chart, and I'm going to drop the link to this into the chat right now.
And this one would be a great resource for, we have a question on Facebook. It says, is it better to start with seeds or with plants for my vegetable garden? And if you look at what Ashley's posting right now, you can see that the yellow line, it's starting seeds, and then the different colors are showing you when they would plant. And it's totally okay to not start by seed. If you have a small garden and you only want to do a couple things, it might be worth your while to just get seedlings, like the seedlings from the store and use those. Um, Now there are
Yeah,
some things I wouldn't buy a seedling. It's partly because I'm cheap and partly because I just don't think they transplant well. Like to buy lettuce plants in seedling form, it doesn't really make sense because you will pay more for the seedlings than you would for like an actual head of lettuce, whereas a pack of seeds is like $2. Like, so that doesn't really make sense. I wouldn't buy corn as seedlings because you need to plant a lot more than you're going to get. Let me think. I think I just saw another one lately. I was like, I wouldn't buy that. Beans. I wouldn't buy
green
beans
beans,
as seedlings. I've seen those sold before, and it's just they come up so quickly. Peas. I would never start those from
right?
a
And
seedling.
anything that, especially like your direct seed, like your carrots, your beets, all those sort of
Oh,
things.
carrots. Yes.
Yes, I mean a lot of things, onions that if you're gonna do like green onions, then you're just gonna scatter those seeds. Now, onion bulbs, obviously, if you're looking to get a harvestable onion, then sets or something like that is gonna work out well for you. But
Absolutely.
this chart again, this is for Central Maryland, so it's a little bit early
Hmm.
for us, but it gives you some good guidance, and I really like because here in red it tells you days to germination, so I get really anxious. I put the seeds in and I'm like, oh, why aren't they up yet? Right. So this helps to give me a little bit of a guidance on, okay, well, this could take 7 to 12 days, so you need to be patient. And then the days to harvest from seeding. So again, that gives you an idea that if it's got a really long, like cantaloupes, we barely get that long of sunshine or that many days of growing season here in Garrett County. So you're going to have to start those as a transplant and put them out, not just as a seed if you're planning to get, some actual harvestable fruits. So this
Absolutely.
is, again, go ahead.
Okay, we just had one more question on Facebook too.
Okay.
Amy was wondering, when would you suggest planting poppy seeds in Oakland? Seed Packet recommends early spring.
Yeah. So we did poppies last year and we planted them pretty late. We probably seeded them like in our greenhouse, probably like end of April, and they did just fine. So if you're planting them directly in the soil, I would think end of April, beginning of May should be okay for them. You're going to get flowers a little bit later, probably like July-ish, into June, but you should be okay.
And I've even seen where people have planted poppy seeds basically in snow, and then they were still able to come up.
Yeah, they're pretty hardy. They're just so tiny.
Yeah.
They're
Tho-
such tiny seeds.
Those are ones that I would not start inside and try to plant out. They're so fragile and it's hard to seed them. I think they're almost smaller than snapdragons. They're very comparable, and neither one I really love seeding.
Yeah. And a lot of your perennials, if you've saved your own seeds and you have lots and lots of them, I recommend just dropping them the season before. So drop them the fall before, just sprinkle them and let Mother Nature do what it will. They'll have plenty of time to stratify. If you don't really have, like a rhyme or reason about where you want them to seed and where you want them to come up, just sprinkle them out there and just let Mother Nature do her thing.
Absolutely. All right, and
Okay.
then somebody just wanted the link for that calendar, and I'm posting that right now. So I think
Okay.
we're caught up on questions.
Thank you. We appreciate all the
Yeah, good
questions and you guys,
questions.
being interactive with us. So this is again just another cold hardy chart. So again, a lot of people think that their crops are going to be killed with the first killing frost, but this is a list of things that can actually withstand some cold temperatures. So just something to think about again, but you can't harvest these crops. So like if you have lettuce out in your garden and it's 20 degrees, you can't harvest it when it's frozen. You have to let it warm back up and, not be mushy, but it will warm back up and then you can still harvest and consume that. So just
I
some
think
things to
we
think about.
I think we had another question, but I must have missed it and it won't let me zoom back to see what it is. So I apologize, Becky. If you want to post that again, please do.
Um, yes, this is new for us, so we're
Yeah.
trying something new this year. All right, the other interesting thing is that every crop, every plant has a particular temperature that it wants to emerge at. So again, your cool season crops, the soil temperature goes across the top in this chart, and then your crops are down the bottom, the left side, and inside of each box is how many days it actually took for these plants to germinate at this temperature. So you can see a lot of your cool season crops, they still want a pretty warm soil temperature to germinate and break that dormancy. So like broccoli needs 77 degrees to come up in 5 days. So again, just information. The longer your seeds are going to sit, especially out like in a vegetable garden or out in just the natural setting outside, the more opportunity there is for soil organisms, funguses, birds, bugs to eat those seeds. So we always want to have a general rule that the sooner we can get these plants to sprout, the more likely we should have success with, getting a good crop to actually grow.
All right. I found Becky. Becky sent her question again, so thank you. She said, I did not put my raised vegetable garden to bed last fall. We've all done that before. My kale lasted all winter, but I need to freshen up the bed and restore it to plant this season. What is the best way to do this? I would personally rip the kale out. It's just going to bolt. And
Mhm.
in my house, I've been feeding the kale like that to my chickens, and they think it's the best thing ever.
Yeah.
Are you thinking the same thing, Ashley? It's
Yeah, I mean, it really depends on how much, if you want to leave a couple pieces of it or a couple plants of it, that's totally up to you. But for the most part, you should probably go ahead and just take out everything. If you have leftover crop residue or anything like that, go ahead and
Mhm.
take that out and refresh the soil if you're going to add some new compost or whatever your soil amendments that you normally follow. I think it's probably okay to just do that. But if there's a certain section where you do have the kale that you want to try to keep growing, but it's always a good possibility that there's pests that have overwintered on there
Mhm.
and those sort of things. Like Sarah, I just pulled out, I had some kohlrabi that overwintered in my greenhouse this weekend, and I thought, I could potentially let that go and try to get some seeds, but I just ultimately there was a lot of bug damage on the bottom rows or the bottom leaves, so we actually gave it to the goats. So
Mine to the chickens, yours to the goats. Yeah, I
yeah.
mean, you'll probably get a couple leaves off of it, but mine was in my greenhouse and it was that's funny. Someone said, give the kale for my chickens. Yes, that's awesome. But yeah, it was all starting to form their flower heads. There was nothing I could save.
Yeah, so sometimes you just have to cut your losses to save pest pressure and your sanity. You just have to
Yeah.
start over. So, but
We're
it's
just
really a
down.
personal choice. There's no right or wrong answer. It's really
Yeah.
whatever you're feeling. And so I'm going to drop another link here into the chat. This is winter sowing. We've kind of talked a little bit about this, and Sarah has done a couple classes live in Allegheny County. So, Sarah, do you want to talk just a quick minute or two on winter sowing, or?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's just a really easy way of basically creating a little tiny greenhouse, and that little greenhouse is going to give your plants a start. The biggest parts you want to remember about winter sowing is you need to put drainage holes in the bottom, and it sounds like a silly thing to remind you, but I've forgotten a couple times. You're going to end up with a slurry, like a soup of soil and seeds, and it's not going to drain well. And once it's frozen and thawed and frozen and thawed, it's really hard to get in there and add those drain holes. So make sure you put some nice drain holes in the bottom. Also make sure that the top does not have the lid on it because you do want the rain going in through the top. And then another part that I always stress, which seems silly, Label it, label it, label it. Don't, like, I tell myself all the time that I'm going to remember something. I am never going to remember it. I'm like, I will put this here in alphabetical order. No, just go ahead and save yourself the hassle. And I label it on the outside with a Sharpie, which normally UV takes it off a little bit. And then you can see how they have that little, I think that's like an old piece of a blind. I don't know what that marker is on that picture, but you want to write on there and make sure you put it on the inside with what it is. And the recent class that we did at the Westernport Public Library, we even kind of sectioned it off because a lot of them were like, well, I don't need 700 milkweed plants. I get it. So they made like quadrants, like 4 little spots, and just did like, okay, I'm going to do wild white indigo here. I'm going to do milkweed here, and 2 other things here and here. And that was a really good way that they could have 4 different natives. And then if one doesn't work, well, you still have 3 other squares that might work. So I wrote down all their email address. I'm going to email them later to see how they did. But this works really well for natives, but we're getting towards the end of the period of time that they might have enough cold stratification time. But the number one reason I always recommend this is natives are expensive, like really, really expensive. And this is a way of doing it for next to nothing. And if you went to the library class, it was nothing. So it's just an easy way to start some natives.
But it's a good lesson on recycling and all that kind of thing too. So yeah, so
Absolutely.
we dropped a link into the chat for a presentation that's on our YouTube channel if you'd like to, check that out and learn more about that process for starting seeds. All right, so we're getting close to, we said 1:15, so we are going to, do we want to talk about soils
Uh,
quickly, or do we want to go on down to
I think we could do just a quick blurb on soil. Like if you haven't had your soil tested in 3 years, do your don't cause yourself a headache dealing with excessive amount of weeds, things not growing properly. Get your soil tested. The University of Maryland, and I can drop that in here too. Um,
Yeah, they have a
so
nice chart. So if you're looking for a soil testing lab to use,
yeah,
you can check out this link. Just a quick note that,
put it in there already.
the most important thing that we can tell you a soil test will give you the information about is your pH. So most vegetables, are going to thrive around 6.5, 6 to 7 on the pH. And if you look at this nice chart, if you learn nothing else about soil science, whenever your pH is in the right range, that's when the majority of your nutrients are going to be most available to your plants. So
Yeah.
knowing that can really help you out.
Yeah, and I just
So
had my soil sampling done here in Allegheny County. I live up the creek. So if you're from here, you know what I'm talking about. And mine was like 7.2 or 7.3. So I need to add some sulfur to mine, which I was shocked. Usually it's a lot more. We did get one more question, Ashley. Did we want to try to do that?
sure, and I'm going to skip on down here to some pruning real quick,
Oh,
but go ahead.
absolutely. Can we talk watering? How often do I water my trays with seeds indoors?
So that's a good question. Usually, once the plants are sprouted, you can lay off the watering a little bit, but it does take a lot of water to get a lot of those seeds, enough moisture in there to make them start to germinate. So, it sounds really kind of silly, but I just stick my finger in there, and if I
You
can
know,
still feel moisture, I just let it go for a little bit longer. But if you don't feel any moisture, and you can kind of take your cues from your plants, but again, if you don't have a fan in there, a little less moisture is probably better, just because you don't want to have the plants can only take up so much when they're little. So once they have broke dormancy and have started to germinate, you can probably lay off a little bit. You think that's
yeah. And then once mine, I don't do this right away, but as mine get larger, I start doing the bottom watering where you put the water in the bottom of the tray. And that seems to help out a lot,
like
especially like
that
you
one
actually,
tray down inside of another tray?
yeah, because I tend to get things that want to be growing on top of the soil. It's when they're too wet and they're not getting the bottom watering, it just seems like I'm dealing with more pest presence. So I avoid that.
Yeah, great questions.
That was a good
So
question.
yeah, we just wanted to do now, of course, pruning is a huge, a huge topic, and we get a lot of questions about it, and we could talk about pruning for days.
Mhm.
we just kind of wanted to do a quick recap, I guess, of if you haven't pruned anything yet in your landscape, some things to be thinking about, some guidance of what you want to start pruning with. If you have never pruned anything, we always recommend that you start looking for dead or diseased or dying branches, anything that looks injured. It's always good to take those plants or those branches out first. Any branches that rub together, any branches that have been broken off by something else, those are good branches to take out. And we're going to show you some pictures. But the 5Ds: dead, dying, damaged, diseased, or deformed. So that's really what you want to be thinking about. And again, people can get really overwhelmed with this whole topic of pruning. They don't know where to start. It's better to remember often, anything you do is better than nothing, right? So, and eventually the more you get out in your landscape and you start looking at these things, the easier it'll become.
And I think once you do it for a season and you see how much more vigor that your berries are going to have and your trees are going to have, you're going to be like, why have I not done this sooner? Because you're probably not getting like very much yield from your plants just because you haven't pruned it. So I've
Exactly.
noticed that with a couple different places I've been. And we're also saying this right now because like we're really hitting the end of period of time when it's a good point to prune. Like now is our end of
Yep.
winter, early spring chance.
You want to
Maybe not in Garrett
really,
County, I don't know.
yeah, not quite yet. We're getting close,
We
but
are
you
here in
really,
Allegheny, that we're hitting our threshold. I was just at LaVale Garden and some of their trees were starting to bud out already. So
so you
we
really
were,
want, the goal for pruning a lot of times is that you want to do the cuts before the plant has completely woken up, right? Before it has broken its hibernation. So you want to go ahead and do that before so that it's not really sapping, but you don't want to do it so early in the season that the plant isn't aware enough to kind of like heal over its cuts. So, February, March is usually the ideal time to really get out there and do that. So these are just a few photos. Again, we could spend a lot of time on this, but if you just want to look at plants that are, let's try that again. Twigs and parts of the plant that are starting to rub together, anything that looks like it's, bowed over from disease, anything like water sprouts. Again, there's a lot of this that we could talk about, but um, again, the more you do it, we have some different photos down here to kind of help you think about this. So like in this example, this looks more like an evergreen tree structure that we see a lot, but anything that's growing the wrong direction, any of these branches that are starting to point downward instead of upward are good candidates to take out. Anything that's intersecting. And again, if you have not pruned ever or for several seasons, the plant can often be very overwhelmed, and it can be overwhelming to just start. So our guidance is to just start somewhere, and if you can just make a few cuts each season, it'll definitely help the plant, and it'll help you to get more confidence in your ability to start pruning.
yeah. And there's so much out there. There's a couple good videos from different extension offices that have really great, easy to understand pruning about how you need to prune it all the way back so you're not getting those straight up. They're called water sprouts. And the biggest thing you can do is just take a step back and just look for those different Ds. The easy ones are to take off the dead and the dying, but just look at the shape of the tree and see what you're trying to go for. Um, Tree pruning is really almost like an art. You need to know what you're going for. And I mean, I guess you could really ruin it. I don't know. Just start little, prune a little bit and go from there.
Yep,
And
that's
then
exactly it.
and
And
then
I
with the
got a lot of
berries,
guidance here. But
yeah.
just remember like when you should prune. So anything that's going to be spring blooming, you should not be pruning that right now for the most part because they've already, set their flowers the season before. So I don't know if you guys can see this slide, but trees and shrubs that bloom early in the growing season often made all of those flower buds last year. So you don't want to prune the majority of these until after they've bloomed in the season. So like your rhododendrons, your lilac, you can see where this person went in and they sheared the lilacs in the spring. So then when it came to be summer, they didn't get any of those buds. So that can be a little bit not the goal of most lilac owners.
All right.
So we have questions. We're just gonna, I don't really think we're gonna
Yeah,
belabor this too much.
exactly. And if you have a specific question, you can give us that, and then we could start with that on the next one too. That would be really good. Or we could even answer it before then, because I know this is kind of a time pressing question. So if you do
Yes,
have any,
and we're gonna put our email addresses in here in the chat. Again, as we kind of, if you guys saw about this before we went live today, you know that you can reach out to us with questions anytime.
and I'm gonna go
You
ahead
can
and put
ask
them.
extension.
I'm gonna put them in the Facebook one too, just so they're in both
Yep.
places.
You can ask questions 24 hours a day through Ask Extension. Most of those questions go to the university and then they get rerouted back to Sarah and I here at the local level. So lots of opportunities to get your questions answered. And with that, we will be back again for the same sort of setup on April the 8th. And we'll hang out here for a little while if you have any additional questions that you'd like to enter in the chat. But we appreciate you joining us on this chilly day. Hopefully that wind's going to let up and the sunshine is going to make it feel nice and spring-like again.
And someone asked if we can post the slides along with the recording, please.
Yes,
And
I
yeah,
think we can do that. I'm not sure how, but we'll figure
we'll
that out.
figure it out, Amy. We're gonna get it one way or another. So the answer is yes. We're not sure how to, but yes.
Yes, yes, we will definitely do that. So yeah, Sarah, any other last thoughts?
Nope. I just appreciate how many questions we got. That was really good. And hopefully next time we'll have just as many. We thought we were gonna just have to entertain for this time, but we got a lot of questions. So thank you.
Yes, thanks for supporting us in this new endeavor. And again, if you
Very,
need
very
anything
well.
from us, let us know. All right,
Yep.
with that, I'm going to stop the recording.